the SMITE Comprehensive Guide to Lancelot. Now, this is a really great example of the significance of junglers and their matchups. In this particular instance, the enemy jungler here is Bakasur, and I am, of course, Lancelot. This is a really bad matchup for Bakasur, and I will show this throughout this match. Another interesting point to make here, and this is somewhat significant for how this match goes, and I will also talk about that because it is really interesting to talk about. First, Bellona is our ADC. The rest of these characters are played in their normal roles. Sun Wukong in solo, Nuwan mid, Charon in support. But Bellona is ADC. This affects my decision making throughout the rest of this match. As for the enemy team, Aphrodite is very specifically their ADC, which also affects my decision-making throughout the match. Incidentally, by the way, I'll have updated this in the description of the previous video. I believe it was Akat324 who requested this. I will have updated the description of the previous video, but this is a request by Akat324. Oh, one final note, the Morrigan is their solo laner. Again, this changes how I make my decisions, and it's important to note this because I will be talking more in depth about this later. So let's go on ahead and... This is loud. I forgot I turned up my volume. There we go. We'll skip ahead another 30 seconds. Now this is the... we'll actually go back here. Notice I took my second ability. I actually was supposed to hit the middle minion with my first auto attack. I missed that. But it doesn't really make a huge difference. Now, I moved to the red buff, as you are normally want to do as a jungler. And she's not done over there with Sun Wukong, so I don't use my ability here. It's very important for her, for experience purposes, that she get at least some of this. She does, you know, pick those up. We're fine. I hit level 2, get my first ability. The horse is too weak at this point to really do anything significant, so we ignore that for now. I go pretty hard on the minions. I probably should have relaxed a little bit more. I almost die here because I pulled minion aggro by poking the Heimdall, but the Bakasur takes a lot of poke as well. Heimdall continues to focus on me. He's taking a lot of minion shots he doesn't need, so I'm okay with this. Alright? And I'm just, at this particular point in time, just waiting for the minions to show up. Nuwa is really healthy, and of course, Bakasur jumps on me. You saw Heimdall use his sword on me, which is a majority of their wave clear, and you'll notice we have pretty much full wave, so I want to take these Harpies, because that's going to heal me, it's going to give us golden experience, it'll probably push me to level 3, which will give me additional options to deal with Bakasur, right? So, kill those, I do get to level 3. Right, now what I want to do at this point is, again, clear the wave. The waves are meeting right here, I go ahead and use my horse, I bust out that ability. Accidentally get hit by the sword. I thought I was going to dodge it. I did not. Right, I notice at this point that Bakasur is missing, so I'm wondering if he rotated to right lane, so I'm going to have to think about that. I was hoping we could get a little bit more damage on Heimdall, but he's far back enough where I'm comfortable leaving. Turns out Bakasur was over here on those by himself. Now, we kind of play around, and you can actually see right there where he backs off right after I hit him with my shield. The reason why this is such a bad matchup for Bakasur is for two reasons. First, I can move faster than him on my horse. He can't match my speed. For short bursts after eating a minion, he'll be able to, but I just have this constant, at minimum, 20% increase to my movement speed. Alright, and he's not going to be able to match that. So the longer the game goes on, the slowly farther back he's going to fall. Unless he gets some really great ganks. That is his big hope here. Alright, the second problem is, because of Lancelot's second ability, he can play Keep Away really effectively, and the scariest thing Bakasur has is his self-buff giving him true damage on his auto-attacks. If he activates that and then I knock him back with my shield, he has to use his jump, which I can then dash away from with my first ability. So it's a really bad matchup for Bakasur, and you're going to see that continuously throughout this match. Right, so right lane gets slapped. Now, it's also really important to talk about why right lane gets slapped here, and this is something that will affect my decision-making for the rest of the match. Bellona does not have range. as a result of that, yes, she's got a couple of abilities that have some reach, but she doesn't have legitimate range, right? So she's always going to have a harder time farming, and you will see this for quite a bit throughout the match. In fact, Aphrodite hits her pretty hard and keeps her down in right lane pretty far until Aphrodite makes a really significant mistake, which we'll talk about when we get to it. But Bellona is going to be hard to gank. Well, Aphrodite is going to be hard to gank, let me be more specific here, because she doesn't have that range. She's not going to be clearing as effectively as Aphrodite is, right? Aphrodite is going to be clearing from a safer distance, consistently. Aphrodite has a stronger self-heal, so she's not going to be down on health as much as Bellona will a lot of the times. So it's just going to be really difficult to gank this. So mentally, I'm keeping this in mind. I'm not really keen on trying to gank right lane. I see possibly an opportunity here. I've hit level 5, but I see Charon is not level 5, so I call for the gank, but he's dealing with the minion waves, and they are going for their purple buff. So I am just going to just take this right here. Bellona puts forth a reasonable suggestion here that they're backing, but I just saw them go to the purple, which of course, well, should have seen that on the ward actually that somebody put down over there. So I, point out that they're at purple, just so that way they know Bellona is going to have a hard time, and I know Bellona is going to have a hard time. But what I'm really looking for, back to the main point here of lanes I want to gank, I will probably want to gank the Morrigan. Because I noticed earlier when checking builds that she wasn't building defensively, she was building damage, which isn't too unusual for mage solos. In fact, it's more often than not what they're going to be building. So I know that she's really going to be very, very squishy compared to Sun Wukong, which gives me a lot more to work with than in duo lane. You might think to yourself, well, Sun Wukong is also melee, which is true, but Sun Wukong is significantly tankier as a solo builder. He's building like a solo laner, so he's going to have protections. He has an ult that will heal him. The Morrigan does not have a self-heal unless she ults like she did as Sun Wukong there, so ganking the Morrigan is a significantly safer prospect than trying to gank Aphrodite. Aphrodite is incredibly difficult to gank in the laning phase, regardless of who you are as a jungler. By the way, this opens up a great opportunity to steal her blue, which is going to be pretty significant here. It's not going to be as crippling with the Morrigan as it would be for other mages, because the Morrigan does actually have decent enough auto attacks that she can use to clear the wave, because her every third auto attack has an AoE effect that does damage over time. So she's got good enough auto attacks where that's not going to be completely crippling, but it is going to significantly hamper her ability to compete with Sun Wukong in fights. So that is going to be good, and that's going to set Sun Wukong up for some really great success in the long run. Alright? So at this particular point, I theoretically don't really need to worry too much about Sun Wukong unless he gets ganked, or I think he's going to get ganked. He should be able to pull farther ahead at this point, unless something happens. Again, I see Bellona over there. There's not really a lot I'm going to be able to do with that. I actually kind of take a peek over here right there. You can see where I twisted to the right. Aphrodite is at, nearly full HP. And there's just nothing I can do with that. She's just going to be able to ult or get out of there. Charon goes over, I'm assuming because he saw the enemy Charon go over. I'm looking to possibly go over there. I think about my speed, but I decide it's going to be more helpful to try ganking right lane here, because with Charon over here, we've actually got a good opportunity here, right? So Charon ults. She uses her ult. She uses beads, right? So I decide to try to slow down Charon. But they're under tower, and there's not really a whole lot I'm going to do with this little mana, so I back. Right, I want to finish my Hydra's Lament so that doesn't happen again. Finish this up. Go ahead and start working on Soul Eater. And I decide I'm going to wait a little bit for Bound Gauntlet. Now, this is a bit of a risky decision here. I am banking rather heavily on the fact that I do have my horse. I am just barely under level 8, so theoretically speaking, Bakasor is slightly ahead of me. He just helped with a gank over in right lane, and at this point I'm checking builds. You can actually see, I'm actually going to go back a second because there's some things I want to talk about here. I think I went too far back. Oh wait, here we go. That was badly managed on my part. And builds. See, the Morrigan right here is building some physical protections. which is fine, but this means that if I am going to gank her an additional time, I'm going to need to do it pretty damn soon. Bakasura, of course, is doing fairly well for himself. You can see the comparison here, where I'm about 300 gold behind, so I'm about a third of a level down, roughly speaking. Ish. And then, of course, we have Aphrodite. Now, she's rushed Kronos Pendant. This is relevant because the Bellona attacked Aphrodite at some point recently. She actually mentions this right after this, so I'm going to go ahead and unpause it here. But keep in mind that she has Kronos Pendant here. This is important pretty damn soon. So pretty soon, Bellona is going to mention how on earth Aphrodite has her ult up again, and the answer is Kronos Pendant right there. How did she have ult up again? In the meantime, because Bakasura went way too deep here, I get to kill him, slap. Absolutely fantastic. This is going to give me a really, really great lead. I was slightly behind before. This is going to put me ahead, and this could be the point at which I can really not only pull ahead but maintain a good lead. I'm starting to get my honor stacks at this particular point. I'm actually going to come over here and clear this wave. Now, Bellona, in response, takes my speed. That's fine. I don't need my speed at this point. Normally, this would be a really big problem. Alright, she drops my speed. She doesn't actually take the buff. She just dropped the speed, but she took that for the experience. She is falling behind a little bit, and that is totally fine. Now, she makes a really interesting decision that at first seems like a bad move, but this I suspect had something to do with the decision by Aphrodite. So Bellona ganks mid lane, which doesn't make much sense. There's not a whole lot she's going to do here. Heimdall was in a pretty safe position. The Nua's a little upset, kind of understandably, but Nua wasn't there to lose the experience, so it's fine. She basically did sacrifice some of her tower here. She's going to lose some tower HP. By the way, I am ganking the Morgan over here just because I do know she's building physical protections, so this is the last time it'll be supremely easy to gank her. You can see how much damage she's taking from us. Just absolutely gets decimated because she doesn't have her physical protections up yet. And then, of course, I want to drop the blue buff. But, yeah, Bellona almost lost her tower because she was in mid lane. And I suspect that this is going to influence Aphrodite rotating to mid for a really extended period of time with some justification. I'll talk about it when it happens. Bakasura, again, being over-aggressive. I'm not too surprised he's back here, actually. He was pretty aggressive earlier in right lane when he went under tower with Charon. I get ulted by Heimdall, but I've got Charon and Nua there, so I'm not that worried about it. Bakasura ults me, which I am worried about, so I ult out. I still want to hang around and see if I can do some damage. Charon is, in a little bit of danger. Bakasura does do really well against tanks, so I am a little concerned about Charon. But Charon gets out, and that's fine. Bellona is getting ganked by Charon, and she is going to throw out a complaint to the Charon specifically. You might think she's talking to me. She isn't. She is talking to our Charon because the enemy Charon is there. So in theory, our Charon should also be there, right? So that's what she's really talking about there. So I'm just clearing out my jungle here at this point because there's not a whole lot I can do. You might think, well, Professor, why don't you just go and gank right lane? Well, two reasons. First, Bellona is so low on health and mana at this point that it's not likely she'd be able to help much. In fact, she dies right afterwards at about, I would say, a third of her health. Secondly, both Charon and Aphrodite were there, which is a lot of sustain. Charon can bust out shields to help keep Aphrodite alive, and Aphrodite, of course, has the self-heal. And she also has a knockback, which makes it very difficult to stay close to her, which is another part of Bellona's problem and why Bellona's having such a bad matchup here. Here's where she talks to the Charon here. But, quite frankly, the Charon, she mentions letting them sit 2v1 in the lane. I'm going to pause this really temporarily because I want to talk about an actual mistake that Charon is making by rotating over there. See, our Charon, who had been behind earlier, because he died, of course, has stuck in mid lane the entire time and not gone to right lane. The enemy Charon went over to right lane to help the Aphrodite with that recent Bellona kill. That was a mistake on the enemy Charon's part for a couple of reasons. First, he was ahead. Now our Charon has mostly caught up. He's probably still a little bit behind in experience, but probably not by nearly as much as he was before. This is because the enemy Charon had to rotate back and forth between mid and dual lane, and when he was in dual lane, he was splitting with the Aphrodite, so it was no more experience than he would have gotten in mid lane. Secondly, you can see that the mid tower has taken some more damage, the bastions have been taken. He wasn't there to help out Heimdall, who was facing basically a 2v1 scenario, and as a result, Nuwa was able to pull ahead because there really wasn't any competition there. So she and Charon were able to split just as the Charon was with Aphrodite, but the difference here is they didn't have to move through the jungle at the same time. All the time that Charon spent in the jungle was time he wasn't getting golden experience. The third reason that I'm going to mention really quick here is in a matchup between Aphrodite and Bellona, given that the Aphrodite was a level ahead at that point, really shouldn't be needed. Aphrodite, yes, does perform poorly by herself compared to how she performs when combined with someone else because she can pair up, she can heal them, etc. But Aphrodite has more sustain than Bellona, ranged attacks, which Bellona does not have, and anytime Bellona does get close, she can use her shockwave to push Bellona away, thereby reducing the amount of melee damage that Bellona can inflict, and well-timed can also stop Bellona's most powerful attack, her hammer swing. The ability, not the auto attack. So Aphrodite in that matchup really shouldn't have needed that help. And in fact, shoots her in the foot a little bit because she doesn't gain as much of a lead as she probably could have if she'd done that alone. Alright, so for these three specific reasons, there are a couple of more smaller reasons. These aren't really important. I wanted to focus on those three, but I just really wanted to talk about how the enemy Charon rotating to duo lane to kill Bellona was actually harmful for his side of the jungle at large. Duo lane, it hurt himself, and it hurt mid lane. All at the same time. For one gank that Aphrodite didn't need and didn't make a huge difference. Yes, Bellona lost her tower, but this only frees up both Bellona and Aphrodite to rotate, and later on you're going to see the Bellona not rotate when Aphrodite does, and Aphrodite probably rotates at least partially because Bellona rotated earlier. Right, by the way, the significant thing about Sun Wukong killing the Morgan and being 3 levels ahead means, look, I don't ever need to go over there again unless he gets ganked. Right, so we pull a nice gank here in mid with Nuwa, trying to slow down my boy here, use my beads. Nuwa picks that up, so I didn't need the beads, but it probably saved my life here anyways, because Bakasor is obviously trying to get me. But it was a great little move there, try to fight for the Stygian Beacon. We have the advantage right now because we killed their Charon, so we're in great shape. This is also going to allow our Charon to pull ahead. Now, Aphrodite rotates here, and Bellona does not. This is where Bellona catches up to Aphrodite, and you can see this right here. Bellona is already almost at level 12. Aphrodite is at the Stygian Beacon. She is not getting that much golden experience. She might be getting some from minion assists when she's closer to the mid lane, but if she's too far away from mid lane, she still isn't even getting that. So she's hanging around at the Stygian Beacon, and again, probably she is partially doing this due to the feelings of guilt players tend to have. Maybe, I can't guarantee this, but people tend to feel bad if their laning opponent rotates and they didn't say anything or do anything about it. So we kill Aphrodite, which gives Bellona all the time she needs to do whatever she wants. She clears out their jungle, which is an excellent move on her part, by the way, because we really don't need the help here. As a team, we're a little ahead. We have 7 kills to their 4. We've killed 2 of them. We've lost nobody. We don't need her here, right? And you can see, actually, where she kind of thinks about coming in here, because she clears this. She's pre-clearing this over here, this wave here. She's pre-clearing this so she can rotate to mid if she needs to. We just don't need her. Aphrodite's dead, so by default, we theoretically don't need her. I'm almost dead, sure. But then we wind up killing, or Sun Wukong kills, Charon kills Heimdall, and then she just doesn't need to be over here at all, right? She returns to right lane and clears another wave. Because, again, we don't need her here. So the Bellona had some great awareness here. Alright, I just want to make that very clear. That Bellona's difficulties in the early game is due to the matchup, not her actual skill. That and the fact that Bellona has a hard time in duo lane anyways because she doesn't have the range to compete. So I'm going to clear this buff to heal up a little bit here. This winds up being a really close call. The enemy Morgan becomes Nuwa and almost kills me. Very close call there. But I'm backing at this particular point because we've taken the Stygian Beacon. They don't need me there anymore, and the only reason I was hanging around so long is because I wanted to make sure that they took it. I would be willing to sacrifice myself for a Stygian Beacon if need be, but it just wasn't necessary, right? That's why I was trying to clear that green buff to heal off of. I wanted a little bit of health just in case I needed to go back in. I didn't, so it worked out. But green buff was the reason why I didn't die to that ult. But now I'm just, you know, returning to clearing. Bakasor has caught up to me a little bit, either because he was farming or he killed someone. I think he was farming. After he died earlier on, I think he was clearing his left jungle. So we attack mid lane here, and the Charon starts tanking this, so I'm willing to go in, right? I have my ult. I land on Heimdall. I set him up for a beautiful slap. He dies. And again, keep in mind that because I jumped off my horse like that, he was rooted because he was in that circle. That's why he didn't teleport. He was under root, and since root is a hard crowd control... I think that's still hard crowd control. No, it's not. But because it is crowd control, I think it slowed down his... I can't remember if they changed it so it's affected by all crowd control, except slows, or only hard crowd control. I can't quite remember. They keep changing it. So this is obviously a great slap for Charon here, right? That's going to give Nuwa the ability to clear mid-tower. You can see at this point that Bellona, due to farming the enemy jungle and taking all those waves, she is now a level higher than Aphrodite, which is absolutely fantastic. And I'll be checking this a little bit later on in the match, but I checked the scoreboard, and I noticed she's built Toxic Blade. I believe by this time she probably already has it, or she just got it, I think, recently. So she's in a great position to contest not only Aphrodite, but also, yeah, as you can see right here, hold on. We're going to go back a little bit so you can see this, because this is actually, again, very, very important. Now keep in mind, we have a really nice lead over the enemy team. She's got Toxic Blade here, she's fully stacked, Devourer's Gauntlet. You can see Aphrodite here, she has the Spear of Desolation, which is fine. Bakasor has Hasten Katana, which is not too unusual. The Morrigan has finished her Contagion, alright, which is fine. But at this particular point in time, we really are in a great position here. Right, we're ahead, we're taking the Pyromancer. Sun Wukong is distracting them in left, well, yeah, distracting them in left jungle, right? Which is absolutely fantastic. I don't have the ability to go in there and help him, right? He also gets out just fine by himself. I believe he used his ult to do so. I get Brawler's Speed Stick because Bakasor heals himself, Aphrodite heals herself and someone else. The Morrigan can at any time copy someone who does heal. I need Brawler's Speed Stick, right? It's an unusually early purchase for that, but there's so much healing on the enemy team that it's just very necessary, right? So I go on ahead and keep clearing. Right, I start leveling up my ult at this point because my third ability, my actual mount up, is now at rank 3, which is enough of a shield to actually make a difference when I ult, so now I'm starting to increase my ult. Bellona calls Defend the Gold Fury, which isn't a bad call, but I'd be kind of surprised if they were going for it, being as far behind as generally their team is. Keep in mind that the Morrigan is 4 levels down. Keep in mind that Aphrodite is just caught up to Bellona. Keep in mind that Heimdall is 2 levels down because he was their mid lane, which I forgot to mention at the start of this, right? And I am roughly on par with Bakasor at this particular point in time. And part of this is because Bellona has been taking some of my camps. You'll notice, actually, she took one of my speed buffs. She took the right speed buff at one point, which is fine, because she was behind, she did need it. I was doing fairly well, I didn't need it as much. It is why my lead over Bakasor isn't as high as you would think it would be. That's why. But again, it's totally fine. Now I get absolutely decimated here because I get hit way harder by Aphrodite than I was expecting. This is my fault entirely. I was expecting less damage for some bizarre reason. Despite knowing she's building damage, I was expecting less damage. So that's my fault entirely. I tend to build her support, so sometimes I have a problem remembering she can actually damage people. But they do take her in exchange, so it's a fairly even fight, except, of course, you can see where Bellona almost died and has to go back. Sun Wukong continues to attack. Now, Sun Wukong is attacking here to buy the rest of the team time to get away, which he does do. They do turn around to focus in on him with very little success, which is one of the great things Sun Wukong is good at, because he can get out of most situations if he really needs to. There are rare exceptions, but generally, most of the time, he's pretty consistent on being able to get himself out of a jam. Bellona, you can see again, Bellona is dropping some buffs as she's taking some farm. Sun Wukong starts doing this as well. Again, it's really fine. I'm doing well enough where this isn't a major concern. But again, this is purely due to the matchup, right? This is because I have such a nice advantage over Bakasor, and I can outpace him at every opportunity that I pinged the damage cam, so Nuwa knows it's down. But I have so many opportunities to outpace him that it's just... I don't need the experience as much as I normally would if I were another jungler. If I was somebody other than Lancelot or Wheelish, this would be a significantly bigger problem for my ability to grow, right? So I kind of thought about attacking Aphrodite there. I decided against it because I don't know if her ult is up. She kind of thinks about trying to steal this, but she can't. That's fine, so I go on ahead and keep on increasing my ult. I look to see if she's chaseable. She is, but she turns around, and her turning around right there is the biggest indication someone's coming, and lo and behold, there's the Morgan. So I back off. But the instant she turned around after having started running away, yeah, huge indication that someone was incoming, and I didn't need to be there, right? Go ahead and clear the oracles to keep an eye on the Gold Fury while we're doing the Stygian Beacon. And here we are, you know, to take the Stygian Beacon, right? So we start working on this, and I'm expecting trouble because they're all up, we're all up, and while we do have a nice lead, it's not so high of a lead that we couldn't lose this, right? But they offer zero contest to that. They do nothing with it. Here's Bologna, right? So I don't see anyone else hanging around, so, and she's still running, so I just go on whole hog, and here's Bakasaurus, so now I'm concerned, right? Bakasaur chases me a little bit, and then he turns around, so I turn around. I really quickly steal all his gold, because why the hell not at this point, right? And this is where I start turning around my, this is where I start to really gain my lead, because you can see him right now a level ahead. He ults me. I have to get out of here, because I'm not fighting that without abilities. Charon slows him down. I hit some people with some abilities to almost die, but fortunately this fog saves me, and of course her minions. He takes the fall because of the damage I dealt. Bologna absolutely fantastically ulting him to finish him off, which is absolutely great. Grab the Crusher, again for damage. I'm looking for more penetration because Bakasaur increases his protections. The Morgan is building some protections. Aphrodite has her passive increase her protections, and of course Charon is their support. So the only one who really isn't tankier than they normally would be is Heimdall. So I'm going to want Heartseeker at the end of this. I'm going to want that extra penetration, that extra percentage of health damage, rather than, say, Runic Hammer, which is what I normally would build, but I just want that extra percentage of health damage there for this team composition, very specifically. So come over here. Now I'm coming over here because I want to make sure they don't get slapped. They're the farthest up here. Nuwa's retreating, obviously.
Not to worry.
Enemy missing.
They start going back. I'm just looking to clear this for golden experience. I'm just waiting to see who does what, right? I'm basically waiting to see if anybody gets picked. And it looks like Heimdall is kind of looking to be picked here. Sun Wukong is theoretically on him, chasing him down the jungle. You can see in left jungle there. I'm not sure if Sun Wukong is going to be able to lock him down, so I do the oracles really quick just to make sure that we know if they're doing Gold Fury. And then I move to join in because there's more enemies coming over, right? So Bologna goes onto the Aphrodite, so I decide, you know what, I'm going to help out here, and we're going to see what we can do this time around, right? I'm 2 levels higher at this point. Bologna's level 19 herself, so we're in a pretty good spot, right? We have, of course, Nuwa here. I surprised them by going through them with my ult. I'm pretty sure the Morgan was not expecting that. Sun Wukong kills Heimdall, so that's their mid laner gone. So right now we have a nice, again, we have a numerical advantage. I run back here to heal. Again, just like I did earlier, I just wanted to heal a little bit here. There it is, decent amount of healing. Now I want to flank, because of course I still don't have a lot of health, so flank would be really nice, but of course the minions would have interrupted that because they would have seen me coming, so I back off, right? We take mid, we back off. I'm looking to steal their jungle at this particular point in time, of course. Just take as much as we can for golden experience. I'm looking to hit level 20 so I can get my Boomba's Spear, so I can go into the jungle and heal even more and also get a power spike, because I've been taking a lot of damage, as assassins are wont to do. Hit level 20, I go back, because again, I really, really want that Boomba's Spear here. It's going to give me 10% cooldowns, it's going to put me at the 30% that I want, it's going to give me 10% more penetration, so that'll give me 40% when I get Heartseeker. It's exactly what I need here. I get healed by minions in the jungle, I get mana back from minions in the jungle, it's exactly what I need here to be able to sustain my way through the remainder of the match. Right, so we start working on the Pyromancer because we're, of course, again, very ahead, and it's just a great opportunity. We don't see a whole lot of them on the field, so it was a bit of a risk, but they don't have any huge ults that usually can steal these, right? Heimdall's ult can't affect jungle camps. Aphrodite's ult doesn't do damage. Bakasor could have stolen it with his ult, but it was unlikely, right? I slap him down really quick. The enemy team is here, but we have the advantage. Again, it's now a 4v5, so that's really great for us, and I'm just looking for an opportunity to push something here. I just go in here. I don't think this is the real one, by the way. She almost bamboozles me, but here we go. We go whole hog on this one. Get rid of her really quick, right? I believe she ults out and then gets slapped by somebody else. No, the wave barely misses her. Right, you can see right there, it almost hit her, but no. So, this is where Sun Wukong calls the Gold Fury, because we're not doing anything with that. Look, yes, we had an advantage of one person over the enemy team, but in all honesty, that was not going to be enough to take a Phoenix, for instance. Especially since we were fairly split up. Bellona was in right lane, which is understandable. We need to take that tower, obviously. But, you know, we grabbed the Gold Fury with very little contest, because, again, they had just fallen back. So, at this particular point, just clearing some stuff for golden experience, I see Bellona getting attacked, so I'm looking to interfere. Right, maybe we get something out of this. She doesn't die, which is huge. Right, we set up the Morrigan for a fall here. And boom, there she goes. Right, now I'm going after Heimdall. He gets away this time, though. But, this time he gets away because of how quick that load is. I don't think, in light of that, the other one was because of my route. But anyways, kill Charon really quick, because he apparently is not building enough physical protections to withstand my penetration. And we take out the Bakasor. Now, we take out this Phoenix, and then the rest of them go right for the Titan. We don't have that ability to take that. Alright, the Morgan is coming up in 15 seconds, and while she hasn't been doing particularly well, she is dealing a pretty substantial amount of damage. And we just wouldn't be able to take the Titan without Bellona there. It's just not going to happen. The Nuwa gets a little upset with me, but it just wasn't going to happen. I clarified that there's too many structures up. It doesn't have its max HP reduced. There was just no way we were going to get that in time before they all started spawning. And you can see the Morgan spawned, and almost immediately afterwards Heimdall spawned, and then a couple of seconds later Charon spawned. It would have ended very poorly if we'd gone for the Titan at that point. If we'd all piled onto that, it just would not have been a good move there. They still had too many structures up. Now, my hope here is that with this Stygian Beacon, we can push our Titan and take their Phoenixes and kill them. That's what I'm hoping for. So what I want to do, and the reason why I'm heading to right lane, is I want to push this wave up so I can really quickly take the tower. That's what I want. You can see Bakasor in right jungle from Nuwa's ult. I kind of assume he's going to try to interfere. I know if I were him, I would. Because he must realize the significance of this tower and why I want to take it, right? So he goes in a little bit here. I start attacking him, right? And he does not ult me. You can see my Hydra's Lament doing some work. I go ahead and ult under the tower because, of course, health shield. And then we have the exciting battle with Heimdall. Use my beads barely in time. And leave. Now, even though the Morgan is right there and she can theoretically copy me, she obviously can only copy me for a bit of time, and also she doesn't have speed buff, so no matter what happens, I am safe, right? There's no way they're going to catch up to me. It's just basically impossible at this particular point in time. With speed and my horse and my stacks, there's no way anything's catching me. So I just leave, because that's what I need to do at that time. And, you know, go back, grab my Heartseeker, because that's the only thing I really have left, and then push left lane. Right? And this is a bit unusual. Now, I have done really well this match purely on the basis that I had such a big advantage over Bakasor in terms of movement, in terms of combat. Lancelot is a bad matchup for Bakasor. This is why I was able to lose so much farm to my allies and still keep pace with Bakasor. Alright? It is for that reason. This is why Lancelot is really good in the jungle. He can be very, very forgiving as long as you don't throw, basically, in the early game. Right? Bellona slaps the Bakasor in jungle. Because at this particular point, Bakasor has been having a hard time keeping up with me in terms of level. right? I mean, the whole enemy team has to some extent been having a hard time keeping up with their laning opponents, but Bakasura has been having trouble because of a variety of factors. So we kill a Charon, we get Aphrodite. Right, now that's the enemy Morgan. We need to kill her because she actually can hit quite hard with that second ability. And I, barely miss. And then I just accidentally steal the kill here with a stab, which is great. And then at this particular point, you can see where there's really not much they're going to do here. Heimdall is just standing under Fountain because he knows it's a lost cause. There's nothing he can do. It's just an absolute decimation. Now, let's talk about builds, because it is also the builds that have caused a lot of these problems. There were two really interesting things here in this game that made things highly interesting, but in terms of jungling, while it did adjust some of my decisions, again, I almost immediately right off the top sort of wrote off duo lane because Bellona ganking an Aphrodite in duo lane is hard enough with a hunter, let alone with a melee character in the role. Now, she did recover, and that's because once she was permitted, once Aphrodite moved to mid lane to help with the Stygian Beacon, and Bellona realized that we did not need her in mid lane, she was able to farm her brains out and catch up, and that was the kiss of death, because by that point, she'd gotten her Devourer's Gauntlet fully stacked, she'd got her Toxic Blade, so she could now fight Aphrodite on par as long as she could maintain proximity. Which is why she also grabbed Frosthammer, by the way. But beyond that, there are a couple of other things going on. Now, you can see, and this is the real disadvantage of using a magic user in the solo lane, if you have a, any opponent really that can do well with protections. Genji's guard is huge for Sun Wukong. It allows his abilities to come back so much faster whenever he gets hit by a magic ability. Of course, that has an internal 30-second cooldown, but it's still really, really good. And, I mean, once he finished building this, it didn't matter that the Morrigan had Contagion and Stone of Binding. She was just doomed. Okay? Furthermore, another really serious problem with the Morrigan-Sun Wukong matchup is the exact same problem of Aphrodite versus Bellona, except Morrigan has range. The problem here is Morrigan does not have innate sustain. Now, she did make the incredibly good decision of grabbing the Hourglass, which is a really, really great item for solo lane mages. But her very next item was not protections, nor was it any form of real sustain. It was Spear of Desolation, which is good if you can secure that early game, but this can be a little bit more difficult for mages like the Morrigan. She doesn't have a particularly great early game. Alright, her first two levels, really great. Level 3 is and then from there it really depends. So she was really banking heavy on the early game, and when I ganked her, I'm pretty confident that that was, the first sign of a bad time. And then the second gank, before she was able to finish Contagion, just because I knew she was working towards some form of physical protection, that second gank just secured Sun Wukong's victory in the lane. I no longer needed to worry about it. Just in the same way that I couldn't really do anything in dual lane because it would be too risky, too difficult, too potentially problematic there. Just absolute insanity, right? It just wasn't terribly likely to work. So, for those specific reasons, didn't bother with dual lane, leaned on solo lane really hard in the early game. That's why. And you could see throughout the match how much Sun Wukong was able to dominate as a result of those two ganks. Okay? And again, Bellona would have had a much harder time if Aphrodite hadn't basically permitted Bellona to farm for absolutely free. And the only reason that Bellona was able to do that is because the rest of the team was doing so well. The rest of the team had pulled ahead by so much. Again, Nuwa was doing really well in mid. Sun Wukong was really dominating. I was keeping pace with Bakasura without even grabbing all of my camps, because again, Bellona had started clearing some of my camps. Sun Wukong once or twice went into the jungle and cleared a couple of my camps, right? Which was fine. I can spare it, because I have so much more move speed than Bakasura that I can go and grab something else, or do a faster rotate to a lane to gank or something, which is again, the real strengths of Lancelot in the jungle role, okay? With a more fair match here, not against Bakasur. Probably that early game would have gone a little bit worse. I wouldn't have had the huge move speed boost. It would have only been a regular 20%. It would have been a riskier fight in the early game middle lane, because of course not all assassins rely on auto attacks. If I'd been against a Ravon, that would have been a bit more problematic, for instance. But, you know, it was a great match for us. We did really well. I mean, overall, it's fairly interesting in that the enemy team's build isn't that odd. Bakasur's build is pretty standard. Nothing too unusual there. Chiron's build, pretty standard. He was clearly going Aurabot, which is fine. Heimdall built Devourer's Gauntlet. That's about the only build mistake I'll say on Heimdall. The problem with Devourer's Gauntlet as a mid lane ADC, a mid lane hunter, let me be actually specific. As a mid lane hunter, you have to get online damn quick, because most hunters, including Heimdall, only really start to do really well in the late game. Most auto attackers perform better in the late game. Heimdall is one of these. Heimdall's abilities are okay, but they don't really match the sustained damage output of your average mage. They hit really hard, do not misunderstand me, but Heimdall's wave clear compared to, say, Nuwa's with her fog and her crystal that she can shoot, but never mind her minions, it becomes very difficult for Heimdall to be able to out-farm the Nuwa in such a way that he can set himself up for a great fight right afterwards. He has a hard time doing that, and that was made worse by building Devourer's Gauntlets. He needed to come online quick. This should have been Aussie, which would have been ready to go immediately. Devourer's Gauntlet has to stack, and that's going to take too long for a hunter in the mid-game. If you're going to bring a hunter into the mid lane, you have to be online as quickly as possible, and stacks are just too damn slow for that. In most cases. There are exceptions, and I'm sure that the Heimdall thought that Heimdall would be an exception because his first 2 attacks in his 3 attack chain are AoE axes, which is fair enough. This is why some people really like to play Heimdall in mid lane, and there's nothing wrong with playing Heimdall in mid lane. He can perform really well there. The problem here is that because he built Devourer's Gauntlet, it took him longer to build up any sort of meaningful sustain, which was clearly what he was going for, because there's no other reason you build Devourer's Gauntlet, whereas Nuwa was focused entirely on mana regeneration. She got the Hourglass, she got the Chronos Pendant second item, she went for Book of Thoth as her third, and then she went right into Tablet of Destinies. Nuwa was entirely focused on mana and entirely focused on damage. Heimdall spent too long building stacks for his lifesteal, which at the end of the day didn't really make a big enough difference, because Nuwa is hitting really damn hard right away almost, right? Once she hits level 3, she's going to be busting out a lot more damage to Heimdall in her full kit use than Heimdall will be able to return the favor of. He has to hit auto attacks for that, and on top of all of that, Nuwa's got minions that she can use to body block for her, which makes that even more problematic, right? Beyond that, and the fact that the Morrigan, again, didn't really build any kind of lifesteal, she really should have built Bancrofts as her second item. There's not really anything build-wise there that's worth talking about. The Bellona did a really nice, pivot here, really turned her match around, did really well towards the end there, and it just took a bit of defensive building. Toxic Blade, Frostbound. Frostbound obviously also is to lock down enemies, but it still gives you a little bit of HP, right? So, build-wise, not a whole lot to talk about here. Pretty standard builds other than what I've already talked about. But, again, great matchup against Bakasur. Lancelot has a fairly hefty advantage over Bakasur in that situation. So, that combined with the weirdness of the enemy team comp just gave us opportunities to snowball, which is what you want to do. So with that being said, thank you all very much for joining me. If you liked this, please like and subscribe. If you didn't, please ignore me. And if you have any comments, questions, concerns, ideas, suggestions, or requests, please leave them down in the comment section below. And to thank you all very much for joining me, and have a great 24 hours.